Well, the Senate hearing for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. took place today, even though he was grilled nonsensically by Democrats who proved themselves to be absolutely crazy and ignorant. And, of course, taking things that he said totally out of context, misquoting him. But that was to be expected, of course. He still got a massive applause, though, from supporters as he left the room when everything was over. Watch this.
And Mr. Kennedy, I look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're adjourned.
People were yelling, Bobby, we love you, Bobby. Pretty impressive. There were some disruptions early on when he was asked about, is he pro-vax, anti-vax? There were some demonstrators who stood up. It's such a
stupid throwaway term. They really tried to back him into this over and over and over again with the term anti-vax, and as if vaccines are a protected class and we cannot think about them individually for each person. So we're going to talk more about this, but It was ridiculous. It was a ridiculous clown show. We're Democrats. We're just dog whistling their side. They kept saying, I only want a yes or no answer to these things, like yes or no, are you pro-vaccine? Yes or no, did you heal people in Samoa? Yes or no? Like, well, let me explain the question you're asking. No, I'm asking questions. That's how it went. I was punching the sofa all day.
So in his opening statements, though, he sort of laid out exactly how sick America is. I mean, that's really the heart of it. Forget all of like the back and forth personality tests here. America is crumbling. I mean, our health is deteriorating quickly. Our children specifically, he said, over 70% of adults in the United States, a third of children are overweight or obese. They wouldn't even qualify for the United States military. Here was just a piece of his opening statement. Watch.
Today, Americans' overall health is in grievous condition. Over 70% of adults and a third of children are overweight or obese. Diabetes is 10 times more prevalent than it was during the 1960s. Cancer among young people is rising by 1 or 2% a year. Autoimmune diseases, neurodevelopmental disorders, Alzheimer's, asthma, ADHD, depression, addiction, and a host of other physical and mental health conditions are all on the rise, some of them exponentially.
So what was astounding, though, beforehand, I just want to give you some insight here. So Callie Means posted this, and good for him, because as reporters were gathering before the senators came into the chamber, there were reporters sitting there from different news organizations, and they were getting ready before the hearing. Look at this, how reporters had pre-written negative headlines written out. So this reporter in red right here, she had already in WordPress, had already outlined and built negative headlines. And if you can't read them, let's zoom in on exactly what she had already written. RFK faces grilling on anti-vax comments and animal mutilation at confirmation hearing. Trump live updates. So the hearing hadn't taken place yet. So why were you writing these negative headlines ahead of time? That's how dishonest the legacy media is, of course. And that's how dishonest a lot of these senators were. Elizabeth Warren specifically, who has taken in over $5.2 million from Big Pharma. Just watch this exchange, and then we're going to bring on a special guest here in just a moment. Watch this.
You financially down the line.
I'll comply with all the ethical guidelines.
That's not the question. You have said
you're asking me, Senator, you're asking me not to sue vaccine pharmaceutical companies. Yeah, you are. That's exactly what you're doing.
Look, no one should be fooled here. As Secretary of HHS, Robert Kennedy will have the power to undercut vaccines and vaccine manufacturing across our country. And for all of his talk about follow the science and his promise that he won't interfere with those of us who want to vaccinate his kids, the bottom line is the same. Kennedy can kill off access to vaccines and make millions of dollars while he does it. Kids might die, but Robert Kennedy can keep cashing in.
Senator, I support vaccines. I support the childhood schedule.
Yeah.
She's not one to talk about cashing in. She really is going to regret that she said this, because now the internet abounds, reminding us how much she has taken from Big Pharma.
Yeah, as I just mentioned, 5.2 million. Congresswoman Nancy Grace made that point. Here's the Babylon Bee that posted this shortly after that. The senators pause RFK hearing to announce this next round of questions is brought to you by Pfizer. Well, our next segment is not brought to you by Pfizer.
That's right. We're going to speak to RFK Jr.'s colleague at the Children's Defense Fund. This is the organization that he's used to litigate a lot of things that are unsafe for our children. So this is not something that's new to this. She was at the hearing. So Mary Holland joins us today. Thank you so much for joining us. I want to get your impression of how this went, and just, I guess, how did it feel to you to hear these questions asked without an opportunity to explain that what the Children's Defense Fund wants is better studies on safety for any medical procedure or medicine given to humans?
Right. So Bobby Kennedy founded Children's Health Defense. It's a different organization than the one you mentioned. And
I'm sorry, excuse me.
But all right. But yes, we were there. And, he's behind science. A lot of science has not been done on the childhood vaccine schedule and on the COVID shots and other shots, the flu shot for adults. He really just wants good science, and he wants there to be transparency of the health agencies so that the information that they're coming up with is available to the public. And then he wants people to be able to have a choice. What is un-American about transparency and choice? That is the essence of informed consent, which is the basis of ethical medicine. So honestly, it was very disappointing to see sort of tirades and not giving him the time to answer the question, as you suggested. It was very disappointing.
Yeah,
one of the things I just want to follow up with this question, and then that Senator Wyden had said is that the science is in. This is already proven science. There's no science that is against vaccines. So why are you against this? What the hell is he talking about when he says the science is in?
Well, it's an oxymoron. When you say the science is settled, that is completely unscientific. Science is always evolving. Science is asking questions and then testing results and seeing what's right. One of the things Bobby emphasized today was the importance of replication. He said today science is not being replicated. When you know you've got something correct, other people can duplicate those results. So I know that he's devoted to real science, not pseudoscience. And talking about settled science is basically pseudoscience.
Yes, we saw that happening during the COVID vaccine discussion. Go ahead, Clayton.
Thank you. Let's talk about the children, because that's at the heart of what I think our nation is facing right now. School lunches, diabetes problems. He talked about this, but they didn't really want to hear this. They didn't want to hear. It seems like they didn't really want to hear this. And as you point out, they kept cutting him off when he would try to explain that we're on the same page. He basically was agreeing with them almost every moment. He was on the same page with them.
Yeah. How can you be against having children be healthy? That was so disappointing. We all should be on the same side, that we want our children to be healthy. And I think that's what's in Bobby's heart. As he's said many times, he prayed for 19 years to be in a position where he could make children healthy again. That's what this is about. And I think, again, some of the people were just off target. They didn't say they don't want that. They just asked questions about onesies. I mean, it was just kind of to be.
Yes.
Are you surprised also that, he was a lifelong Democrat. You hold up in such high regard, like the Kennedy family, it's unbelievable to me, the vitriol coming from these Democrats. It's almost like they've taken a lot of money from the biopharmaceutical complex.
Well, they've all taken millions. They've all taken hundreds of thousands and into the millions. That's just across the board. That's how our system works, unfortunately. Senator Whitehouse was Bobby Kennedy's roommate in law school. That's how that It's his cousin who wrote to the Senate and said, this guy is a predator. It's really nasty. I have to say, being in the room today, you just felt that half the room was involved in being nasty. And it's so disappointing. We look to the Senate to be leaders of the country, to make the most important decisions for the public. And they were really engaged in nastiness and trivialities. And that's incredibly disappointing. I really respect Senator Johnson, who said, aren't you sick of this? Aren't the American people sick of this polarization? We're talking about children's health. We're talking about people's health. What is politicized about health? It shouldn't be, but it is. The reality is it is.
What strikes me so much is over the weekend, the Wall Street Journal published these two stories. One was a total hit piece on RFK Jr., and the other one was a wet kiss for Bill Gates. And when the reporter asked him about RFK Jr., he said, well, he's accused me of murdering a bunch of people. Now, we know that many vaccines that Bill Gates has implemented through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation in Africa has been correlated with infertility rates increasing. And the reporter had no follow-up question. She was like, well, that's too bad. Whereas the media coverage of RFK Jr. is, you did kill people in Somalia, or where was it? Samoa, rather, because of rescinding this vaccine program. Can you not see? It's blaring to me and incredibly unethical.
Right. Yes, there's a huge double standard. I would say on our website is a really important film about infertility caused by vaccines in Africa. It's not specifically about Gates, but it's called Infertility, a Diabolical Agenda. And it's a real thing. Vaccines were given in Africa that, by all appearances, were known to cause infertility. And Bobby wrote a lot about the role that Bill Gates and the foundation has played in the book, The Real Anthony Fauci. And I highly recommend it to people. It's eye-opening for most people.
And the media coverage is just astonishing. And we showed you earlier before you came on, Mary, that there were reporters in the room who had pre-written negative headlines ready to go before he even entered the Senate chamber. Does it surprise you, the mainstream media's response to this?
Clayton, I wish it did. I mean, literally, Bobby Kennedy on the issue of vaccines in particular has been a punching bag for 20 years. And what's so exciting to me is that he actually did get an opportunity, despite the people shutting him down. He got an opportunity to talk to the American people. The American people want to have an adult conversation about vaccines. There are risks and benefits like every other medicine. And Bobby Kennedy is prepared to have that adult conversation. And again, what was so disappointing is not everybody in that room was ready to have that conversation. But if he's confirmed, we are going to have some adult conversations. These can be life-saving for some people. They can be deadly for others. That's like aspirin. That's like certain foods. They can be positive and negative. It depends. And Bobby understands that, and he wants to do real science and then let people make their own decisions.
Right.
Well, I'll get you out of here on this, Mary, which is, what do you think is going to happen? So many people in our chat right now who are watching live are just wondering, is he going to be confirmed? I know you're obviously heavily biased in favor of him being confirmed, but what's your gut tell you?
My gut tells me that he's going to be confirmed. I mean, I don't have any science behind that, but that's what my gut tells me. And I do believe that he has a lot to give this country. I believe he really sincerely wants to contribute, and he really has studied a lot about U.S. healthcare and what would make it better. And I personally, on a personal basis, I'm not speaking on behalf of the organization, but I personally hope that he will be confirmed.
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of people in our chat are saying confirm RFK Jr. right now. RFK forever. So, all right.
I mean, look, we knew this was going to be brutal. I didn't expect the vapid nature of the questions, and he was not able to push back and say, well, what's wrong about this? And it just was a clown show. But we appreciate you being here and giving us your take. Analysis. Yeah. And you can find the Children's Health Defense at childrenshealthdefense.org or follow Mary at Mary Holland NYC. Thank you so much for being here.
Mary, thanks for all your great work.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Today's show is brought to you by Native Path Collagen. Now, finding an honest doctor that isn't following in the footsteps of Big Pharma can feel impossible. That's why millions of men and women have turned to one Texas doctor and the 7 reasons that he says anyone over the age of 50 should be drinking this one thing. That's right. It's not milk or another calcium-rich drink. Instead, it's a unique protein that naturally declines with age, and it's proven to significantly increase bone strength and soothe joint pain. Oh, we all need that. It minimizes wrinkles and cellulite, even enhances hair follicle thickness, and even reverses nail damage, with users reporting results in as little as 2 weeks. That's right. As a partner of the show, this Texas doctor is offering Redacted listeners up to 45% off his bone, joint, and ligament restoring formula. It's all you need to do is go to this URL right on your screen, getnativepathcollagen.com/redacted. It has thousands of 5-star reviews, over 4 million jars sold. Every order comes with a 365-day money-back guarantee, so there's no risk to try it today. And Redacted listeners can visit right now, getnativepathcollagen.com/redacted to get up to 45% off while supplies last. Well, one of the big questions that came up was about conspiracy theories. And, and this was a question that's been thrown. This was a term that's, of course, been lobbed at Robert F. Kennedy Jr. for a long time, that he's a conspiracy theorist. Here's exactly one of those moments. Watch.
Are you a conspiracy theorist?
That is a pejorative, Senator, that's applied to me. Mainly to keep me from asking difficult questions of powerful interests. I was told that I was a conspiracy theorist. That label was applied to me because I said that the vaccines, the COVID vaccine, didn't prevent transmission and it wouldn't prevent infection, when the government was telling people, Americans, that it would. I was saying that because I was looking at the monkey studies in May of 2020. I was called a conspiracy. Now everybody admits it. I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said red dye caused cancer. And now FDA has acknowledged that and banned it. I was called a conspiracy theorist because I said fluoride lowered IQ. Last week, JAMA published a meta-review of 87 studies saying that there's a direct inverse correlation between IQ loss.
All right, so I'm going to assume
I could go on for about a week.
Is there any one of them that you can say, you got me? That really was a conspiracy theory, or are you in a position?
Yeah, not yet. Not yet, he says. It's hilarious because the term conspiracy theorist was born from the CIA for anyone that wanted to question the assassination of his uncle, John F. Kennedy Jr., shot in the face. Conspiracy. You're a conspiracy theorist. And then it was a pejorative, of course. Another person who is labeled a conspiracy theorist and worse and canceled is Dr. Pierre Kory, who told the truth about ivermectin. They canceled him for it, of course. He's written an amazing book called The War on Ivermectin, the medicine that saved millions and could have ended the pandemic. And Dr. Pierre Kory joins us now. I don't want to call you a conspiracy theorist, but you are you're a brilliant doctor, brilliant man. So
we use the term on this show, conspiracy knower, because these conspiracies have borne out.
I like to say that I peddle in inconvenient truths.
Okay.
Yeah. So does these are all a lot of what Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said today was inconvenient. The inconvenient truths for a lot of those senators who have taken millions of dollars from the biopharmaceutical complex. It was highly inconvenient. No wonder they wanted to cut him off. But just your high-level 30,000-foot assessment of today's hearing, Doctor.
Yeah. I mean, in some ways, it was unsurprising, right? We understand how polarized our political environment is. So you saw, favorable questions, reasonable questions from one side, and then unmitigated attacks from the other. And so that was somewhat unsurprising. But they went further than that. What was most troubling to me was seeing, and I'm sorry to call out a political side of the spectrum, but seeing Democrats use this, it seems like they're provided with this narrative of this word settled science, and almost attacking Bobby for wanting to re-examine and be more transparent and looking at data on things that are supposedly safe, which many things, for instance, toxins and pesticides and pharmaceuticals, we all know that the science is a bit cooked around there. They have very short timelines of follow-up after exposures, and then they deem them safe. And then as you study it over time with emerging data, you have to reanalyze your positions. It's anti-science to say it's settled science and to try to block someone who wants to do reanalysis and trying to ensure safety. And so That to me was so brazen and absurd. I thought it made them look ridiculous. I don't understand how you can have those positions.
Well, especially after this election, when they realized that these pejoratives turn people off. Because if you say Trump is a Nazi, then what are you using to back that up? Well, we just don't like him and we don't like the things that he says. And so people are starting to see through this. Like, don't say labels, come up with things that are constructive. But they were very committed to these anti-vax labels, this you're against the science that I have and you don't. I was very sort of blown away when Senator Smith said, we already know that SSRIs are not correlated with school shootings. What research is she using for that? They're just making things up and calling names.
Yep. It's easy for them to say these things, right? And then what I actually find more troubling is when they hold up papers and say, put this into the record. You know, the real challenge is just like our media has narratives and it's very controlled and influenced, so does our scientific apparatuses and journals. I mean, they do not publish inconvenient truths or inconvenient science to industries. And we know that there's pervasive censorship, and it's been going on for a long time at the level of medical journals. And so when you produce all these, published papers to support a point of yours, it's really not the way you should be doing science. We need to look much more broadly for much more objective, unconflicted sources of data. And when you do that, you start to really ask the tough questions like Bobby talks about. He just asks tough questions, and he's trying to get the data to answer them as accurately and as objectively as possible. And I think he's our champion for that. And I can't support him any more than I do.
The senators were also a little upset that he might want to go after big pharmaceutical companies and suing them. They have immunity, of course, and pushing these different COVID vaccines. Senator Elizabeth Warren freaked out about that. She, not disclosing when she asked the question that she has taken over $5.2 million from these biopharmaceutical companies. But she's really concerned that Bobby, as head of HHS, will sue these companies. Does she have a right to be worried?
Last time I checked, he was a lawyer with a celebrated track record of suing corporations for malfeasance. It's what he does. He's expert at it. He also, as he talked about, he's expert in all of his work as a lawyer in seeing the ways in which industry captures our governmental agencies, and he wants to unravel that. And then she's asking him to promise not to sue them. I mean, he's going to cover, if he really tries to make the HHS as transparent. I love that term that he used today, radical transparency. I can't think of anything more that our government needs to follow than radical transparency. And when that happens, I got to tell you, those companies better worry about what happens after he gets out of office, because he's really good at what he does. And I believe there's going to be a lot of data that he's going to be able to use to sue them and punish them for the things that they've exacted on the American people.
Well, when you look at the court cases he's taken on, Elizabeth Warren's main point was, you've enriched yourself, she said, by litigating against Big Pharma. But if you look at his cases, he's representing people who were hurt. It does not, I don't know how anybody could paint his litigation career as an ambulance chaser. He's actually pointed out things that the rest of us should know about fluoride, certain vaccines, what's told to us. His major point was, shouldn't the American people know? Shouldn't we just tell them? Shouldn't we replicate the science and give them the fair warnings? And it seems to me, their answer to that is, no, we want it like it is, exactly like it is, right?
Yep. I mean, if you look at his track record, right, he has a consistent mission of protecting the little guy, those who've been wronged and been polluted and damaged by actions of corporations. And that's been, his career, and he's excellent at it. I mean, he's really won some really big cases, and he's righted some egregious wrongs that were committed by various corporations from other industries. And so I support him in continuing to do that. And I can't think of anyone better. I mean, he's really good at what he does.
Dr. Corey, I'll get you out of here on this. You see a lot of patients. How bad is it right now for America? How bad is our healthcare system? How bad are the symptoms that you're seeing from Americans over the course of your career?
Clayton, that's an hour-long answer. I'm going to try to keep that short. Think by you.
Well, if we were Democrats, we'd say make it yes or no.
Yeah, make a yes or no.
Yes or no.
Is it bad?
Are we dying or not?
Yes or no?
We're fine.
The answer is yes. Yes, it's bad. But no, briefly, I mean, where I practice medicine now is in a really specific area. I'm completely specialize and focus on the treatment of those with COVID vaccine injury syndromes as well as long COVID. And that is the greatest unmet healthcare need in this country and the world. This constant ignoring of vaccine injuries and the scope and scale of them, it continues to be disgusting to me. And these people are suffering. They do not get compensation. They do not get treatment. They go to system doctors who just refer them, do tests, endless testing and imaging and referrals for physical therapy. They have no understanding of disease and no willingness to treat. There's no one trying things to try to mitigate their suffering. And I just see immense amount of suffering. My patients, they all are sick and tired of the system. They're sick and tired of being failed, gaslit, and abandoned. And I can't paint a worse answer to that question, Clayton. It's really bad from where I sit.
Brutal to hear. Absolutely brutal to hear. Well, the book is The War on Ivermectin. Of course, they tried to silence you. Do you think your message about ivermectin is now getting out? Do you think more and more Americans are paying attention to it? And what do you want Americans to know about ivermectin?
Yeah, I mean, the essential point and theme of that book is that I view that book as a really dynamic and illustrative case study in how disinformation tactics are practiced by industries against, like I said, inconvenient science. And ivermectin was a threat to them, it was a threat to their bottom line and a number of markets that opened up in COVID. And the way in which they were able to sort of kill ivermectin with disinformation in the media, fabricated trials in the journals, I think every American needs to know about it. And that's what I tried to teach in that book. And I think that message is out. I mean, you guys know the study a lot of us doctors quote about that was in JAMA from a few months ago, where the trust in doctors and hospitals from 2019 to now went from 71% to 40%. That means a large majority of this country no longer trust their doctors or hospitals. And it's because those doctors and hospitals are being fed corrupt science and bad practices that really serve to make profits for industry rather than to benefit patients. And I think they're waking up and wising up to that. And I think that book is a really damning illustration of how that happens.
Our guest has been Dr. Pierre Kory. As Gary in our chat says, Dr. Kory is great.
Yes.
Wonderful guest, as always, to have you here, Dr. Kory. Thank you for speaking truth to power, and thanks for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
All right, folks, the countdown is on before this new administration starts to expose the entire globalist agenda and how a large sum of people had their health negatively impacted by what these globalists did to us. So whether you're, suffering severe side effects or experiencing long COVID, you need to check out this natural solution formulated by Dr. Peter McCullough in collaboration with the Wellness Company. And they just leveled up their original detox formula for $30 less. It's introducing the new 3-in-1 Ultimate Spike Detox, conveniently consolidated into just one capsule. That means it has 4 times more nattokinase, 500 milligrams of bromelain, and 500 milligrams of turmeric root extract, all inside of one capsule. Crafted with 100% natural ingredients, the Ultimate Spike Detox is backed by research, offering effective support for your cell's natural repair and recovery. Experience the only formula approved and used by Dr. Peter McCullough, a top freedom-fighting doctor who risked it all. Head over right now to twc.health/redacted. Use the code redacted to get 10% off plus free shipping. Again, use the code redacted to get 10% off. Go back and get that pre-COVID feeling right now. Some people are saying that JFK was confirmed. No, they have to vote on that. So that's not. You have to go through a voting process.
Well, the Senate will vote today. He'll face the House tomorrow, which I'm sure will be just as fun.
Oh, that'll be fun.
Yeah, I don't know how. I was watching Cheryl Hines' face because she's an actress, and she did keep quite a straight face. I would be flipping the bird behind if that were my husband and I stood behind his. Well, I do, darling. If someone takes the piss out of you, I do, in fact, curse them with terrible athlete's foot. Yeah,
the dragon.
Yeah, that was something. We brought a little joke to tell you if you would like. This is from the Babylon Bee. Do we have this? Yeah. Fattest, sickest country on earth. Concerned new health secretary might do something different. And It's hilarious, but also it's terrifying because all of the Democrats that really wanted to get their SOTs in so that they could put it, SOT means sound on tape, get their sound bites in so that they could put it on their X account and rile up their base. They don't have an alternative. They think everything's fine the way it is. So talk about ostrich syndrome. There's no other
and
way
the
to
amount
put it.
of money that's been spent by the NIH, and he made the point. He was able to get this point out, talking about how many more billions we've been spending on chronic childhood diseases, chronic diseases in the United States. He made the point about his uncle JFK that they weren't. I think it was like 0% or something like that. They weren't even spending anything on chronic diseases, or almost nothing, back when he was a child and his father was president of the United States, because we didn't have a problem with it. And now we spend a massive amount of our GDP on chronic diseases in the United States. There's a clear problem here in the poisoning of our food system with all of this processed garbage and all of these poisons and things in our water supply and everything else. So we desperately need a change. So we'll watch this hearing, and we'll watch the voting on all that come together.
Well, the White House has rescinded the memo directing a federal funding freeze. So this is something that's hotly debated. Is President Trump actually pulling back all federal funding from everything? If you listen to Democrats, you would think, oh my God, he's getting school lunches. He's taking it out of the hands of your children. That's not quite it. So we're going to go through what's actually happening. Here's the statement from the new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. She said this is not a rescission of the federal funding freeze. It's a rescission of the memo that directed the freeze. She says it's to end any confusion created by the court's injunction. The president's EO on federal funding remain in full force and effect and will be rigorously implemented. So she's indicating that this should end the litigation that was filed by several states, including New York and California, to stop it. Well, New York AG Letitia James says this does not end the litigation. This doesn't really clear anything up. So she's going to be in court today. AOC is saying this is a big win, but it may not be if they're still going to pull back funding. They're just not going to do it through this memo's directive. So you can see here AOC is saying this is Trump's first major loss. When we fight, we win. So now he may not have she says we as Democrats may not have the majorities in the House and Senate, but we do have the power to loudly educate and mobilize against mass looting the Trump administration is attempting against our veterans, healthcare, education, and more. Well, I don't know if it's about educating and mobilizing. They're litigating. They're using the courts, which is what something Tim Walz told Rachel Maddow this week, is that we're going to use the courts for pretty much everything Trump does. Everything will be a battle. So dig in. Community Notes, you might want to notice, has got her on that. What's interesting is I'm not going to call this a loss for Trump, but I'm not going to call it a win either, because the memo was confusing. People were a little bit concerned about which direct benefits would be affected, and they freaked out, and that caused the litigation. So he may have to learn to do this a little bit more slowly. He understood, and in fact, the memo said that the American people gave him a directive to shrink the federal budget, which is true, but it might have been too big of a blow, too big of a hammer swing, don't you think?
Yeah. Well, I think, it definitely was confusing, perhaps inelegant, I guess. But having to sort of walk it back and the sort of like leaking of the memo ahead of time, it was not a flawless scenario.
No,
by any stretch.
Definitely not. But what the White House is doing, which I find so interesting, is debunking media and Democrat lies in real time with their new X account, which is called Rapid Response 47, which I do want to suggest that you follow. It's a good idea. I wonder why no other president has done it before, because, the press secretary feed is just for her announcements. The president, well, he uses that, willy-nilly, however he feels. But this idea of taking these headlines and then telling the truth about them, great idea. Hadn't seen it before. So, for instance, when AOC said this yesterday, that Trump shut off Medicaid because the Medicaid portal did, in fact, go down, she's community noted all the time. But oddly enough, that doesn't motivate her to do better. So Rapid Response clarified on this hoax on this thread as a hoax, saying that, in fact, individual assistance programs such as Medicaid and Social Security and SNAP are explicitly excluded from this, and then a directive from the memo. So we see this happening in real time. I find this kind of interesting. But, people who our anti-Trumpers are not going to necessarily use this as like, oh, I was wrong on this. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. But at the very least, it takes some of the air out of the sails of any kind of misleading headlines that we will see. Now, the White House also has gone on to offer to pay out federal workers who want to quit with what they're calling a deferred resignation offer. Some interesting things to note about this is that you can choose to resign as a government worker and you will no longer be required to work, and you can be paid through the end of September. So these are voluntary resignations. If you think you're on the chopping block, you don't like this job anyway, you'd like to find something else, you can go on vacation. It says you can do whatever you want. They're expecting between 5 and 10% to actually take this offer, and they're clarifying again that you can receive your full benefits and pay. So we can't have these headlines right now with this transparency. Oh, they're pushing people out with nothing. That's not true. Also, the Democrats that are freaking out that we're taking people's jobs, oh my God, what are they going to do? This was a great point I saw online. I wish I had thought about it, saying the same people who are now clutching their plurals, claiming that government workers can't be fired, were previously cheerleading when government workers were fired over vaccine mandates. Excellent point. Democrats all of a sudden care who gets to work and keep their jobs. They certainly didn't during the pandemic. So we're going to see how this plays out, whether it plays out in the courts or not. I mean, I think that most of us, what we want in the end is a smaller federal spending line, full stop. Right? We also want the end of some of these nonsensical programs. How it happens, how it ends up, we'll see. It's just the beginning. It's been a roller coaster so far.
Yeah,
Week
in fact,
2 of the Trump administration.
Caroline Leavitt today talked about, and President Trump mentioned today, that money that they were planning was ready to go like right out the door.
Sorry.
Okay.
Sneeze.
All right. Okay.
That was perfectly timed with the right out the door, like you're like right out the door.
Sorry, I had to sneeze and I did not want to do that on camera.
Well, you more than did it on camera. I was like the rolling out of the door right as I'm mentioning right out the door. I'm like, what the hell are you like playing?
I'm going to pantomime everything Clayton says.
So President Trump today said we're not going to send condoms to Gaza.
I was going to do something about condoms, and then I was like, no.
That's why I chose that one, to see how you're going to pull that off. Get it? So yeah, all of us spending $50 million to Gaza for condoms that Hamas can use to I mean, like, this is the amount of, this is what your taxpayer dollars are going for right now. And most Americans have no idea because there's no transparency in it. It's all hidden. And now that we have some transparency in it, the chickens have come home to roost on this.